Alabama Supreme Court has ruled that a frozen embryo in a test tube is a living child. With that, clinics in Alabama have stopped performing IVF out of concern that a mishap could lead to legal ramifications for doctors, hospitals, and clinics. This is a consequence of Roe v. Wade being overturned. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. Hope you're having a good day today. As you know, I don't get very political except for when it comes to health implications on this channel here, but at the same time, I have to call things out the way when I see it. I realize that not everybody is going to agree with me on this, but I do try to present a respectful conversation. I do welcome comments from people, whether they agree or disagree with me, but obviously conversation is a super important thing to getting resolutions to different problems, but this is one that really got me bothered, especially as a doctor who understands things about science and health and people and reproduction. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about what IVF is, how we got to this point, and what people can do about it. Okay, so first of all, what is IVF? Stands for in vitro fertilization. Okay, so eggs are removed from a woman's body and is combined in the laboratory with sperm. And that's what causes the fertilization, and that's when an embryo is formed. An embryo is just a cluster of cells at that point. Okay. Now, there will usually a clinic, if a woman is under age 35, they will typically retrieve 5 to 14 eggs. But if there's an older woman, they will actually retrieve more than that, in between 10 to 34 eggs. And it's done that way because we know that the viability of eggs as one ages is more potential to be problematic. Also, genetic issues like Down syndrome, for instance, in older women is a more common thing. So they harvest these things, and then they can look under the microscope. They can pull some DNA, some of the chromosomes out to see if there's anything that's going on there. Okay, so this is done before implantation takes place. That is all taking place in the laboratory. Okay, now a lot of times the implantation will happen soon after that, but there are situations where they may remain frozen for a long period of time, and we'll talk about why that may be. Now, most families who do this do it because it's their only way to have a child. They've tried other sources. Nobody wants to have a baby if they could avoid it through medical procedures. A woman has to take hormones and chemicals in order to prepare the body in the first place. They have to do things in order to take hormones to support the early part of the pregnancy until their own hormones can kick in. So there's a lot that goes on, and it's obviously a beautiful process when it works, but it's certainly not a natural process. But people do what they want to do what they have to do because they want to have a family, if they want to have a family. Now, what are these used for? It's used for people who have, if a woman has blocked fallopian tubes. There could be other types of female infertility issues. There could be male infertility issues. There could be a surrogate pregnancy that is needed. Also, if a parent or both parents were to be a carrier of a serious, potentially fatal genetic disorder, they'd want to know about this. They may want to be selective again with those with embryos that are chosen to not pick one that is going to, God forbid, have some type of not make it through the pregnancy because of their genetics, or very unlikely to survive more than a couple hours, couple days after they're born because of the genetic deficiencies. Also, LGBTQ plus families will do this as well in order if they want to have a baby, but it's not through normal sexual intercourse. Now, 2% of all babies in America are born via in vitro fertilization, and there have been over 8 million that have been born overall with IVF. Now, with the way technology is now, also cryopreservation of embryos can be done. I've heard of people doing this prior, perhaps if if the partner is going into the military, for instance, and they want to harvest it, but they may not be around for a few years to raise that child, and they want to be able to be there. So maybe they're concerned that they should do it while their sperm are more healthy. Just as an example, there's lots of other reasons as well. So how did we get here? Now, the former president of the United States appointed 3 very conservative Supreme Court justices, and really took the guidance from Christian groups and the very conservative Federalist Society in order to decide who they will be. And he was very clear that he was only going to pick Supreme Court justices who would rule in this way. Okay. Now, the Dobbs decision, that's the name of the case that overturned Roe v. Wade. That's what the United States Supreme Court ruled on, and that's what turned everything around. And that's what sent things back to the states, the individual states. So these types of things that you're hearing about regarding whether it's regarding to abortion or IVF or other types of things, this would not have happened if there was still a federal law that says a woman has a right to reproductive health and to decide what she does with her body. Okay. Now, in addition to that, multiple states with conservative legislators have passed what are called fetal personhood laws. And this means that the idea that even that every fertilized egg is entitled to full protection under the law as if it was a human being. Okay. Now, to be clear, this is a religious concept. This is not a scientific concept. Okay. But not only that, this is not in line with the overwhelming majority of Americans who strongly believe that this is not part of life, that IVF should be okay. And granted, that may not have been the reason why they did it. I don't know that they were necessarily wanting to ban IVF, but the Supreme Court of Alabama was reading the law that was passed by the Alabama legislature and signed by the Alabama governor. So they were reading the Constitution, the law, based upon what was presented to them, and in their interpretation of the law, which is what it says. If you read it, the words, I mean, I don't know that I could actually even fault the Supreme Court justices for the decision that they made if their job is to interpret the law, the words that are put in front of them. Okay, they could have chose not to, of course, but their job is not to make the laws. Their job is to interpret the laws. So I get that. I put this on the politicians. Now, in terms of how Alabama ruled overall, so what they basically did is this case stemmed from wrongful death lawsuit brought on by some couples whose frozen embryos were accidentally destroyed by a clinic. Okay, and they ruled that the frozen embryos are children and would be protected under the state's what's called the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act. So by this definition, and again, this is where maybe you can call something out on this from the Supreme Court, because they are defining a fetus as a minor. Okay, and yes, they're basically calling a cluster of cells a child. There's no other way of doing it. There's no organs. There's no nothing there. It's just a cluster of cells. It's interesting because I wasn't wondering, nowhere during my pediatric training where I have become an expert in treating children was I ever taught how to take care of an embryo, of a cluster of cells. Gee, I guess my pediatric training was lacking because I never learned that before, because it's not a thing. It's not. Now, the act also refers to the death of a minor caused by the wrongful act, omission, or negligence of any person. Okay, so let's say if there was a technician who accidentally dropped the test tube, maybe they put it into the test tube holder and it slipped. Okay, that technician could be sued for killing someone's child. Okay, what if the power went out to the freezer? What if someone didn't pay the bill? I don't know. Lots of things. So if the power went out, is somebody going to be held liable? Is the power company going to be held liable because they couldn't sustain energy to the freezer? I mean, if you were to look at the way that this is written, there could very well be those type of repercussions. Now, the Alabama Chief Justice also, his name is Tom Parker. He also included very overtly religious content in his opinion, writing specifically that the state constitution includes the theologically based view that human life cannot be wrongfully destroyed without incurring the wrath of a holy God. What the heck? Separation of church and state, anybody? Not everybody believes in a God. Not everybody believes in a wrath of a God. That's not the entity that is my deity, if you will, is not, I don't view as a wrathful person. In fact, there's an energy out there that I believe helps lead me towards right, but wrath? Nah, that's not necessarily the way I see it. That's not the way other people see it. Now, only a minority, 38% of Americans do believe that life begins in conception. Now, I will say this. If you are a person who does believe that, I'm not going to argue when you believe that conception is. And if you believe it's wrong to terminate a life after after not just insemination and conception, but implantation after there's a fetus, that's you, and I will respect your decision on that. But you know what? That's not my religious belief. Okay? In fact, in Judaism, we are taught that the human life begins with the first breath of life, and that actually takes several weeks for the soul to actually fully enter. And in fact, if there was a fetal death or if there was a death of a newborn, a traditional funeral is not even held because this entity did not have a soul yet. Okay, in the Islamic faith, they believe that life begins at 120 days after being pregnant. But you know what? I'll respect everybody else's decision, but will the other side respect mine? Will they respect others? Others, people who don't comport to their same religious beliefs. Why should one person's religious beliefs be more overrule another person's religious beliefs, or somebody who is not religious and doesn't have religious beliefs, but they have personal beliefs that this is what they think is right? That's not the way things are supposed to be. We don't live in a Christian nation. We don't live in a religious nation. We don't use our Bible in order to guide our laws. You can choose to do that as part of who you are, and I will love and respect and honor you for doing that. Okay. Now, the Alabama Supreme Court ruling actually listed the Dobbs overturning of Roe v. Wade 15 different times. Okay, so to say that this what happened here is not due to the Supreme Court's decision to rule in favor of Dobbs and overturn Roe v. Wade, that makes no sense. They said it specifically in the case itself, cited 15 different times. Okay, now let's talk. There's, and it's not just this. So the last remaining Republican candidate, who is out there, the other one, she has said that embryos are babies. Okay, the Republican senator from Alabama has said that he was all for the decision that of the Alabama Supreme Court, saying it's the right thing to do. It's the politicians. It's who people are voting for, who could choose not to vote for. Okay, so what are the implications, the ramifications, repercussions here? Okay, so first of all, as I said, the major clinics in the state of Alabama have stopped performing IVF. They're not willing to take a chance. They're not willing to be held liable for a murder if there were to be some type of mishap. Okay, now of course that is denying many families the right to grow their family, which of course is not a very pro-life approach if you're not trying to support the life and the growth of a family. Certainly not pro-family, not pro-family values. Now it is interesting that now we've seen a lot of Republican legislators, politicians are running away from this, and they would really would do nothing to, but the thing is this: even if they overturn this particular thing, it still does nothing to define when life is within the uterus, okay? And therefore coming down to, I know whether people have talked about 6 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks before that abortion could be illegal, but obviously this still leads to day number 1, okay? The Alabama governor, and actually now supposedly in both houses in Alabama, they're attempting to fix this by writing a bill to declare that an embryo that's not in the body is not considered life. We'll see if that passes. Obviously, it passed in the first place, saying that it did. The Alabama governor has said he's going to pass it. Will it happen? We don't know. We just don't know. We'll get them to sign in the first place. Now, there are other implications here as well. Okay, so first of all, this whole concept of fetal personhood raised some very interesting things. Does that mean that if a family has embryos that and the family breaks up, what happens to child support? Who gets custody of those things? Should one of the separated couple be responsible for paying for those embryos and not another? Who knows? That's how it happens with child support, right? Who gets to pay for that? Taxes. If 34 frozen fetuses, 34 frozen embryos are in a freezer somewhere, doesn't that mean if they are actual people that they can be written off 34 times for taxes as a dependent? Hey, that seems like that would be implied from this, right? So who knows? But the legal uncertainty of even certain forms of contraception, and that's why when you hear people say, "Oh, we're not trying to ban contraception," but you know what? An IUD, an intrauterine device, whether it's hormonal or copper, conception actually has happened, fertilization has happened, and the IUD makes the uterus not hospitable to accept that embryo for implantation, and it doesn't allow for the embryo to survive. That would mean that IUDs would be in their eyes, the death of a minor. Think about that. That's what this word says. Okay, so what can you do? Well, pay more attention. If you didn't see this coming, you're not paying attention, because this seemed pretty obvious to people who were following this story, that something like this could happen. It may affect you, may affect some of your loved ones. You can vote for people who support your decision, your opinion. Again, whether you are pro reproductive rights or you're anti reproductive rights, whoever you are, vote for people who you support. Reach out to the representatives to voice your opinions and your concerns. You can join activist groups. You can support activist groups run by professionals who know what they're doing to make the biggest impacts for lobbying and everything else like that. But nonetheless, just another repercussion, unintended consequences. I think this is an unintended consequence, but nonetheless, it's a consequence already. Have a nice day.